Who wins between Horus and Sanguinius? And who is the Dark King? Friends, let's find out, and welcome to another 40k video. Big spoiler warning here for The End and the Death Part 2 by Dan Abnett. We will start with Sanguinius and then move on to the Emperor. There will be timestamps below. The Dawn and Valdor sections of the story do not progress a great deal, so I'm not going to include them. And first I want to say that for each of those in the vengeful spirit, Horus wants them there, as he wants to test them to see who will fall to his side. As Sanguinius continues through the guts of the vengeful spirit, he runs into the spirit of Horus Manus. First says that Horus is letting him be there, and that Horus has so much power that he finds little pleasure in it. But he still cares for the great angel and wants to turn him to his side. Sanguinius responds with, "I'd rather die, fighting till my last breath, and let the galaxy burn. Even if I can't stop Horus, I'd rather die fighting." Sanguinius is rightly suspicious of encountering the spirit of his brother here, but this person feels like Horus. Horus says that he was headstrong and wants to warn the Blood Angel's Primarch not to be. And if we ever get Horus Manus back in future developments in Warhammer 40,000, I would love to see him back with that learned as a lesson for his character. Horus then acts as a guide for Sanguinius. Horus explains that the ship is twisted, and whichever direction Sanguinius travels in, he will reach Horus. But they find, when they do that Horus can't be seen. And it's here that Sanguinius hears the voices of, as Horus puts it, those who like me have fallen, and the mortal remains of those who have become other things. The warp devours our souls, the Gorgon says, those lost and those discarded alike, Magnus, the Pale King, Alpharius, the Red Angel. It spares no one. Death is not release, brother. It is unending torment. Lesson 2, remember. First says that all the spirits are there to watch what happens. Some allowed to come, others willing themselves there. First says they did not find Horus because Sanguinius is not ready. And Sanguinius says he's not sure if he can kill him. First says you don't know if you want to. And I just want to remind you here, listener, that Sanguinius and Horus were very close. Horus knew of the Blood Angel's secret that Sanguinius would not even tell the Emperor. First says he must set aside grief. Sanguinius admits that he misses his brother and could not see it before but now does. And he wants to find Horus. Horus does not need to guide him this time. And before they part, Horus tells Sanguinius that the Emperor could not find Horus because the War Master had put himself mentally into his own past, his memories, so he could not be found, or his plans understood, and now he wanted to be found and is rebuilding himself mentally. A small advantage for Sanguinius perhaps, and soon after, Sanguinius meets his fallen brother. They say little to each other, but in short order, the War Master's offer to Sanguinius is rejected. Horus sheds a tear, and despite the speed of Lupercal, Sanguinius is fleeter, and says, "You lack brother," and Horus sees here Sanguinius has to pretend that he has courage in the face of Horus. Then Sanguinius uses his speed to take flight, to help him stay alive against the warp-corrupted power of the War Master. Sanguinius is trying to provoke the anger of Horus, and he has managed to damage the War Master's gear. He turns, but Sanguinius has already found him again, arcing like a Seeker missile. Encarmine, swung with both hands at full force, strikes the War Master's front plating. Failing reactive shields pop with a bang. The blade strikes a thick section clean off the hip of the gorget and leaves a bloody tear across Lupercal's left brow and cheek. Horus roars like a woken dragon. Now he's found the rage within him. Sanguinius flies at him with such sudden and ferocious speed. Horus Lupercal has barely time to move. The angel rains blows upon him, across his head, his throat, his chest. Encarmine cleaves the War Master's scalp open, the line of his jaw, and severes the bunched pipework at the base of his neck. Blood hoses out, jetting into the stale air, and Horus roars as he stumbles aside. Sanguinius allows no time for respite or riposte. He swings his peerless blade with both hands in a wide and scything slice that rips through Lupercal's midsection and opens plate, subarmor, flesh and meat down to the bone. Horus sinks onto one knee, panting and gasping as steam and pitch-black blood pump out of him. Entrails protrude. Hematomesis chokes him. "Stay down," says Sanguinius, sword raised. "Do you want to be alive to greet him, or would you rather be spared that shame?" Horus aspirates blood. A cough or a laugh, it is hard to tell which. Stay down, brother, Sanguinius urges. Out of my love for you, I will grant you a measure of mercy. Please, I can make it quick and painless. There is no mercy here, says Horus Lupercal. So, time is up. The pause ends. Sanguinius brings the sword down. He's so fast, you don't even see it coming. The perfect execution stroke, the most precise, most merciful, most important sword stroke he will ever deliver. But it will not land. Worldbreaker's haft stops Encarmine dead. That look on his face is gratifying, Horus thinks. He can't believe you're on your feet. He can't understand why your wounds aren't slowing you down. He can't comprehend where your fluid speed is suddenly coming from. It was always there. You're just not holding back anymore. You let him come at you, blow after blow, each one a death stroke, each one an exemplar of the swordsman's art. Even in despair, his talent doesn't abandon him. None of them work. You bat them aside as they come, with maul, then talon, then maul again. You want to give him a moment to let the despair really sink in. Sanguinius takes flight, white wings wide, a flash of gold to encircle you and strike you down from above. He thrusts down, trusting in his one advantage, the ability to fly, and turns their two-dimensional fight into a 3D assault. But what are 3 dimensions compared to the multitude Horus commands? He soars above you, a vertical ascent. You reach along the 8th angle of space and grab. Your talon closes around his trailing ankle. His climb arrests with a brutal jolt. For a second he's anchored in the air. You bring him down, hard, swinging him by his leg like a hammer. Into the deck, you let him slow, so you can relish every detail of this moment. His wings brush up around his arms as the air pushes them forward. The slow swirl of his hair around his face, the tiny jagged cracks on his golden shin guard as it splinters between scissoring talon. The feathers torn loose by shearing wing load, floating end over end in the air as he leaves them behind. The O of his mouth, the clutching left hand, the shock in his eyes as they slowly stretch wide, the dilation of his pupils, the impact. The fragmentation of the deck plates under his shoulders, head and back, the sick bone crack of his right wing as it crushed beneath his body and the floor, Encarmine jarring from his right hand, the ripple of concussion that travels through his body as it makes contact with the deck, the strained rictus of his features as he absorbs the blow, the furrowed squeeze of his clamping eyes, the angled trajectory of a shorn deck bolt punched clear of the deforming plates, the compression of golden war gear as it flexes and ruptures along multiple joints and cracks, the sudden slackening of his facial muscles, and the sword Encarmine falling slowly. Horus takes in all these details and more. You give him some credit, Horus thinks to himself. He's not giving up. He tries to roll onto his side, but the grudging pain of his broken wing stops him. He flops back. He rolls the other way. He tries to rise. He makes it onto his hands and knees. He gropes for his fallen sword. It's just out of reach, along with most of his broken hopes and the memories that were smashed out of him. Go on, get up, Horus thinks. Let's see if he can. Hunched over, broken wing dragging like a limp ermine cloak behind him, he crawls. He makes no sound, not one whimper or groan of pain. That's impressive. Horus balances Worldbreaker ready. He's found the sword. He clutches it tightly by the grip, breathing hard and using it, tipped down, as a support as he drags himself upright. And he's up. He's standing, though awkwardly, keeping his weight off that shattered ankle. He's panting like a dog, chest heaving. He wipes the blood from his mouth. For a second, you want to offer him the chance to submit. He extended you the same courtesy, so it only seems fair. But this is your court, and you decide what's fair. This is your house. You are a man of your word, and you told him there will be no mercy, so there will be no mercy. He turns to look at you. You're already descending on him, bringing them all down. Find this hard to read, guys, I won't lie to you. Somehow he avoids it. Worldbreaker kills another section of the deck. He's swinging Encarmine at your head. The talon parries it. Sparks fly. You sweep Worldbreaker at him, but he deflects it with a cross-body slash. You lunge to seize him by the throat. He evades the snapping talon and thrusts his blade around your guard. You knock it away before it bites. He's got a little left, a little strength, a little speed, more than you expected. He deserves his fame. You exchange blows, trading for in rapid succession, each one parried or hooked aside. Oh, he's good, even now, still trying. Death has brought out the best in him. Maybe despite everything, he still thinks he's invincible. You will disabuse him of that notion. You slam your lethal claws around him to crush him. He isn't there. He slipped aside, a flash of gold as fast as a sunbeam invading you at the speed of light. But you move at the speed of darkness. You catch him on the backswing, your talons shearing locks off his hair and snapping his head sideways. Willbreaker does the rest. It hits him just above the hip, falls him double and hurls him across the court like a doll. He flies one last time. His spinning body strikes the ornate prayer screen of your private chapel. The fretwork carved from solid diorite, without any trace of tool marks, smashes as he goes through it. Small splinters of stone clatter to the deck. You follow him. You walk over to the side chapel, slowly. There's no reason to hurry. The bladed head of your maul is matted with blood and golden hair. You walk past the shattered screen to your entrance and look in. He's landed, face down on the cool stones of the floor, his feet towards you, his head towards your altar. There are pieces of broken fretwork all over the floor around him, and his body has knocked over 3 metal stands of votive candles. You see him move. The injury you've done him is catastrophic, and it has also torn open the old wound, the one Angon inflicted. Blood is pooling under the angel in a wide scarlet mirror. You see him shudder as he tries to lift his head, and his arms spasm as he tries to raise his shoulder and his chest. He won't be getting up this time. When he raises his head, shaking and weak, the altar is the first thing he sees right in front of him. You see him recoil at the sight of it. He can't help but stare, his chest lifted on bent arms, his body trailing flat like a supplicant prostrate. The altar is wrought of pre-dynastic dacite and quartz. You had it intricately inscribed with sigils, and etched with phrases, texts that the whisper of the court have told you are sacred. It has 8 steps like a ziggurat, and there are skulls, each one ritually arranged to face out, so that their empty orbs stare at anyone who enters the chapel. There are thousands of them. Most of them are human. One is set centrally in pride of place. It is the one Sanguinius sees first when he lifts his trembling head. Its gaping socket gazes back at him. The yellow bone of its brow is carved with the numeral X10 in Roman numerals. This is where it will end. This cross here. You hear the angel murmur a single wretched gasp. Manus. It is the only sound he's uttered since you began to kill him. You stand behind him. You give him a moment to appreciate the reunion and to realise that it signifies what he thought earlier with Manus. Until we meet again. That's long enough. Who lacks now, brother? Horus taunts him horribly. He tries to turn over and face you. You grasp him by that broken ankle and drag him out behind you. Horus Lupercal holds all of time stilled in one hand, and Sanguinius in the other. Sanguinius, broken beyond measure, gazes up at the soaring arches of the Lupercal court. Even broken, he will not go quietly. Even broken, he will not make this easy. Lupercal growls. Does he relish this? Hate it? Consider it an annoying waste of time? When he has better things to do? There is no way to fathom him, for he is no longer remotely human. And Sanguinius doesn't care. He can feel the gaze of the old four on him, staring from the shadows with eyes as bleak and wicked as the one adorning his brother's breastplate. They have come to witness this, and everything that will follow. They mutter to each other excitedly, and around him the numerous legions of their spawn gibber and whisper in darkness. Sanguinius can feel the sheer size of them, the mass of the dark gods. He will show them the defiance of mankind to his last breath. No matter what you think about Sanguinius, you can't deny that he goes out well, in my opinion. Sanguinius lifted him off the ground, pincered in his talon. Every fractured bone and tear in Sanguinius's body shrieks as he hangs there. Blood spurts from between his golden lips, squeezed out of his body, Willbreaker rising in the monster's other hand. Sanguinius lashes out with his left hand, gouging desperate fingers at his brother's cheek and eyes. Horus barks in anger and drops his prey. Sanguinius falls onto his knees, jarring every wound, then topples onto his side. He tries to rise, trembling, weak. He wants to be on his feet when it happens. He wants to be standing when Willbreaker catches him. Before he's even back on his feet, the clubbing blow breaking his shoulder, ribs and left femur. He collapses, trying not to scream from the pain and failing. Horus starts to bludgeon him, beating him repeatedly like a disobedient dog. There's no art in this anymore. No martial skill, no patience. Willbreaker shreds arm and flesh. It pulverizes both collarbones. It ruptures a lung. A fine drizzle of blood fumes the air around the two figures. The brutal beating, and God, this is brutal. between the giant and his prey. The sixth hammering impacts Sanguinius' head around, twisting his jaw and transmitting such force that the skin on the left hand of his face, from brow to chin, is flayed loose. It flutters, then drapes back like a slack mask. As he falls forward, the talon vises him again. It lifts the ruined, tattered angel into the air until he is face to face with the first found instrument of chaos. Horus squeezes slowly. He is expecting some last words, some immortal and heroic declaration to mark the end of a majestic, noble life. It ought to be something good, something appropriate, but Sanguinius is no longer capable of speech. He's drowning in his own blood. The claws close. There is a double crack of spine and neck. Horus waits. Blood drips. It's done. The talon opens with a mechanical clack. His brother's corpse, so loose and mangled, it seems almost boneless, drops to the deck. An ugly sound of impact to mark an ugly ending. Horus sighs and walks away. Things scurry forward from the shadows to nail the body up. And guys, that's the last part of the book entire. We'll cover the Emperor section in a moment, but yeah, that was a tough read. As a fan of Sanguinius, his death is brutal at the hands of Horus. And I hope that the Emperor is equally brutal when he faces Horus. I want to see this guy suffer for what he has done to my favourite Primarch, Sanguinius. But anyway, let's move on to the next section, where we'll cover the Emperor's role within The End and the Death Part 2 by Dan Abnett. And at the end, I'm going to give you some general thoughts on the lore and on the book itself. The Emperor and his custodies continue through the vengeful spirit and the warp that is against him. He uses to fight back, conjuring up flame storms from his very fingertips. We are told chaos opened the sunless sea of the Empyrean to him, and so he drinks from it to increase his own power, and is within the custodies as they fight. And as the Big E gathers chaos power, he's moments away from becoming the Dark King. Alanius, an old perpetual and one-time ally, finds him. The Emperor has become drunk on the warp to defeat Horus, and is becoming a god. All but one custodies that fight with him are dead, their bodies burnt by his radiance. Those that have died are still kept fighting though under his control. The Emperor, speaking through a custodies, wonders at the odds of seeing this person here and now, this fellow perpetual. And amongst other agents, Alanius says the hand of Malcador was in this. You are becoming a god born from the warp, says Alanius. You may not recognise it yet, or be prepared to accept it, but you are. And that, quite clearly, is the last thing you ever wanted to be. You're a man, the most remarkable and powerful man that's ever existed, but still a man. Every step you've taken has been based on rationality, and it's created the Imperium, but you retained your humanity, even when it would have been easy to let it go. You retained your emotions because you knew they were vital. You even forged it into your sons because it was what was important to you. That man is still inside you somewhere. I hope he is. And he goes on to say, does Alanius, you need to defeat an immensely powerful adversary, so you make yourself stronger without thought to the consequences. What are those consequences, Alanius asks Caecaltus Dusk, who is the custodies the Emperor is speaking through. You will not stop. This expediency will lead to the next, each one justified by the one before. You will never have too much power. You will never have enough. There will always be a reason to seize more. You talk as though you possess great wisdom and insight, but you do not. You're right, says All. I don't. None of us foresaw this possibility, not even Erda, the Eldari Lord, or even the Sigillite. But my journey to meet you has been counterintuitive. My thinking has been linear, but my route has been backwards. You're assuming the mantle of godhood, simply to destroy. To protect, the charred custodian replies. To defend. No, All snaps back. To shortcut your way to another quick solution that disregards all later consequences. I've told you this before so many times, but you've never listened. You're almost a god, Emperor. Take this moment to examine your plan, not as the man you have always been, but with the perception of a god. Surely you can see its flaws and the errors of the configurations you so diligently fixed. A god might perceive the truth where a man cannot. The Dark King is not the solution. It is like every repair you've made, the act of a restive mind. The Dark King is an existential disaster, but its saving grace is that it allows you a perspective you've never had before. Use it, I beg you. And he looks. You see the truth then? Asks All. I see the danger. You see the future. No, murmurs the proconsul, for there is none there. It is a black, waiting to be filled by a new plan. A plan that learns from past mistakes, asks all. Any other form of plan would be idiocy. Man grows through learning and learns through growth. A king, made wiser through revelation, sharpens that wisdom through good counsel. A man such as this has always stood beside the golden throne. A man who was not afraid to gainsay. A man who had not infinite patience. You're rightly afraid of all things in this cosmos, Alanius, including me, but you have never been afraid of the truth. Alanius hears a sharp chiming sound like the crunch of glass or the fracturing of crystal. The blue aura pulses, the mirrored face of the great black sphere is beginning to shoot and feather with cracks, spreading and multiplying rapidly. Perhaps then things will be as they once were, says Dusk, but this must be resolved first, before any future can be contemplated. Let this be ended, and death be damned. And the substance of creation shudders, materia and immateria vibrate in shock. The electrons spinning around the protonic nuclei of every atom in the real space universe stutter and briefly cease to obey their mysterious quantum obligations. The power of the Dark King is expelled and scattered, pouring back into the Empyrean, from whence it came, carrying with it flotsam and jetsam, the broken prophecies and driftwood predictions that brought it hence. The never-born wail en masse, their whispers turned in on themselves, twisted back into lies and cackled falsehoods. Their future, so assured, suddenly untruthed. The malison of the Dark King passes from the material galaxy and back into the simmering casket of myth, for this age at least. And Malcador, struggling to stay alive on the golden throne, also sees and thinks this. My lord and friend has broken off a part of his soul. He has amputated that portion of himself that contains almost all of his hope, loyalty and compassion, for such things will become a hindrance when he faces the Lupercal. Those qualities might stay his hand or make him hesitate if he is ultimately obliged to kill. He has set those frail and cardinal virtues adrift on the tides of the Empyrean, so that they will not immobilize him, and in the hope that one day he will be able to reclaim them and be whole again. On that, friends, we'll wrap up the lore section of the video. I'm just going to talk about my general thoughts on the book and the lore. Some goddamn good lore that has come out of this. So my general thoughts on the book, I struggled with it at first, but I definitely got into it as the day went on, and I love the Emperor stuff and the Sanguinius stuff, two of my favourite 40k characters. I've covered most of the revelations here. I find it very interesting that, like Magnus the Red, the Emperor has taken off a shard of himself and cast it into the warp to reclaim again one day. Perhaps there is a certain plot within 40k by the author of this book that might be leading into that possibly in the future. But that's something I'll come back to later. Apologies if you're here for the Dawn and Valdor stuff, there just wasn't a lot there. Basically, in a couple of lines, Dawn holds on to his identity, he repeats his name to himself, and speaks of different wartime doctrines that he knows. Then he hears the Emperor's call, and Valdor fights demons from the warp, and then hears the Emperor's call. I didn't want to put a timestamp in for those parts because I thought it would have been a bit rubbish if they were like 20 seconds, so I just thought I'd be honest with you that they're not included. And now my hopes for the final book. I want at this point the Emperor to destroy Horus, and I think he's in that sort of frame of mind. And it's quite interesting if you think of what the Emperor later says, amongst other things, to give it more context, to Rabuti Guilliman, that he is his tool. I know he just doesn't say that about Guilliman, he says other things, but that's one thing that he does say. And perhaps it's easier for the Emperor to endure on that throne, only with the cold, callous parts of him, and not the hope. So for what hope would there be if he was suffering and regenerating on the golden throne for 10,000 years? Anyway, friends, I'll wrap up my thoughts there. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a pleasure reading the book and brilliant reading it to you. And just to let you know, like the last parts, the Sanguinius parts, I actually stopped reading the book and read them to you directly here to give you my honest reactions, and hopefully it came across a bit cooler in the audio. Anyway, I'll end my ramblings. I'm going to go and watch a film with the family. So I'll wrap things up there.